Welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Make a Game. As you can see in our little world, some things have changed, especially the looks, the code which makes the terrain more or less smooth, so that we don't have the squarish tiles anymore, but a much more smooth surface, with still tons of errors, such as this one right here. But overall it is rather pleasing to look at, but the code for this is such a freaking mess that I don't intend to program it on camera. If anything at all, I will just release the code and maybe some of you can come up with a better solution than what I have. Another thing that I programmed in, you can clearly see, is that we have some tree growth going on. We have several stages of trees which are growing until the fourth stage, which I believe is this one right here. Once it has grown into the fourth stage, it will have a chance of spreading some new saplings, such as this one here. That was a rather nice example, and therefore create new tree life. Now, of course, what you are seeing right now is maybe a time speed up of about 100 times or so. So what you're seeing here is a very fast growth rate, just so that I can see how the whole thing behaves. Right now we would eventually get too many trees. We have the tendency to always raise the count of the trees, so there will be a few adjustments we'll have to make. But also, this is not going to be the topic of today's episode. What we are going to do today is much more exciting, and that is finally some gameplay. What we will be able to do with our villagers is click on a tree, and the nearest villager will be assigned to said tree. He will be walking towards it with a working speed, and he will take some time in order to cut down the tree, and there will be some logs popping up when the tree is cut down. If we go for a tree which is in a much lower growth stage, we will get nothing, or maybe just a little bit, like this one here I believe is in the second growth stage, and we only ended up with one single log, where we got 8 from the fully grown tree. Another thing that I programmed in together with this code is that if we tell them to harvest more than they are able to do so, it will turn red, and once it is assigned to a villager it will turn blue, so that we know where the villagers are going and what they are actually doing. And look at that, oh my gosh, that is freaking awesome. So that is exactly what we're gonna do right now, so let's meet back in the program. Okay, let's have a closer look at what we actually need in order for this to work. First of all, we need a sprite which will represent the marking of a job. In our case, this sprite only contains 2 images, one being red for not assigned and one being blue for assigned. I made them transparent so we can put them on the top of everything but still see through them. Of course, we also need the corresponding object assigned to this texture, and what it actually contains I will show you in a second. What you also want to make is whatever the heck drops from your trees once you cut them down. In my case, that is naturally a log. This log currently only contains 1 image, but this is not the final version. It will contain several images. Depending on the growth stage of the tree, different stuff will actually drop. But for right now, that is fine. Of course, we also need the corresponding object for our log, which goes into the world objects folder in my case. Next up, one important thing that I adapted is my script assign sprites. I made it universal so that I can put it on anything that requires assigning sprites in the create event. Now, if we have a look at this script, we can see that the way I'm doing this is simply by defining the object, such as our trees. So we check if the object index is trees, and only then this code will actually happen. Now, the assignment code for the trees I will only show you. You can pause the video if you want to have a closer look at it, but I'm just gonna briefly go through it. What we are doing here is creating a variable which we can use across the instance. So also in other events, a variable with the prefix self we can actually call from anywhere, from any event in the same instance. So we set the growth value to a random number between 0 and 100. Now this is a very important variable in another script we are gonna code afterwards, but right now it shall not concern us any further. Next we are setting the image speed to 0 so that it doesn't flicker through all the different textures, and we get a new variable which we can only call in this script. The random growth stage variable will get a number between 0 and 3, which is exactly 4 images, so that is the same amount we have textures for our trees. And we go with a switch statement, which I explained in a previous episode, so we can just call upon this rand growth stage variable, and in case the variable turns out to be 1, we want to set the image index to 1, then set a break so it doesn't go through the rest. Case 2, image index 2, case 3, image index 3, and in case we had more growth stages we could simply add them right here. The default growth stage is of course image index 0, which is the sapling stage. Now, as I said, this script doesn't only assign textures for the trees, it does it for everything. So right here, for instance, you can see the messy code which makes all the landscape appear smooth, which is a pretty hefty piece of code I'm not yet sure about, but also all the menus are assigned right here, and I can just put this same script on any instance create event I want and add it to the object index list. Anyways, let's close this off and have a look at the next two scripts we have to adapt. For instance, in the global variable script, we want to add the global.survivor working speed, which I have set to 1.5, so they hurry up a little bit when they have something to do. We could also set this to 2, so they have double the speed when they are working. We can close this off, that's all we had to do. Another thing that goes really quickly is in the debug GUI, which we draw on the left top corner. All the information is stored in here. This is just for easier programming so that we are aware of what's actually happening. I added those two objects to the list, the jobs and the logs, of course, in the same manner as always. So yeah, that's basically it. That is the easy part done. A few scripts adjusted, we have prepared the objects. A few more things I need to show you before we get to coding is of course the tree sprite. I totally forgot about that. We have here 4 growth stages. The third one will be able to spawn new saplings, the first one will yield nothing, and you know, just so on and so forth. We will be able to adjust that. The images are of course as per usual, not the final version. I also renamed it to be tree01, as we cannot have multiple trees in one instance, the way I coded it at least, so we're gonna make different sprites for different kinds of trees. Now for today's episode we're gonna need new scripts. I made a new group, object jobs, so everything that is in here will go on the object jobs right here. We have the go-to job in the step event, and we also have the draw health in the draw event. The draw health right now is mainly a debugging tool so I can see what's going on. The third new script is the set health in the create event. Now this will also go on multiple objects, as we can set the health, for instance, for various trees differently, or maybe some stone have a higher health value so the villagers will take longer to cut it down. That is the intention anyways. Let's briefly have a look into the object so you know which scripts are applied where. Right here on the survivor in the create event we have the alarm for the movement we have done in the previous episode, but I also set a new variable which is called self.available, and I set it to true, so only if a villager or a survivor is available then he or she will be able to take a job. That's all that's new to the survivor. Most of it, of course, is done in the object's jobs. On the create event I set the image speed to 0, so it will be on the red stage, therefore no survivor has been assigned yet. And I also execute the script set health on the create event. Again, this is a universal script which we can place on various objects to set their health. In the step event we have the script go to job. And finally in the draw event we have the script draw health. Okay, so now that you know where all the scripts are applied to, which objects you have to create, we are ready to program these 3 scripts. Okay, let's take care of the easy stuff first, the set health script on the create event. Now, I was actually lying to you when I said we are gonna make this universal, but at least by checking the object index, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna set it to universal by having it on the object jobs create event. So whenever we create a job, it will check for which object the job is applied to, and then it will decide on the health variable. So easy as that. What we can do is make a subtitle, maybe call this trees, and in here we're gonna check if there is an instance of such a tree, object tree01, and if that is the case, we want to set the health points of our object job to maybe 100. We could go even more in depth by defining different health points for the various growth stages, but I think for the time being I'm just gonna set it to 100, so that's gonna take about 2 seconds to cut down. Of course, in a final version of the game we would make this a little bit longer, but for testing purposes this is a lot better. So now, assuming we would want to create a job for cutting some stone or whatever, we can just check if there is an instance of the object stone. We might run into problems depending on whether or not several objects can be in the same tile, but for the time being they cannot. That's all there is to the set health script. Let's continue. Let's do another very easy script, which is a debug script, the draw health on the draw event of a job. Now maybe to better exemplify this, we are not actually cutting down the tree, we are cutting down or lowering the health points of the job object itself, and the job object will decide what happens when it reaches 0, what happens with the object it is placed on. So that is kind of the trick right here. Anyways, we are gonna name this draw health. There we go. And the first thing you want to do in a draw event is to draw self, because otherwise you will not be able to see the sprites. Also, we are gonna set the draw color, actually draw set color to see white. And last but not least, we are gonna draw a text on the XY self health points. And there we go, that's all we had to do for this script, believe it or not. Now let's get to the complicated part. Oh, there's one script that I almost forgot. The script activates stuff, which is our global left released, which is actually located on the heart object. So I can left click on a tree, it will check whether or not I'm clicking on a tree, and if I'm clicking on a tree, then it will create the job event in the first place. Of course, we need a way to create the job event. So let's add that to the script. We want all of this to happen after the global.survivor generation. So we're gonna check if that is false, and in case that is the case, we want to check if there is not already an object of our job, so we don't want to be able to create multiple jobs. So we check for an instance place on the mouse X and mouse Y position for an object jobs. Okay, if that condition is also satisfied, we check if there is actually a tree. So in here we are creating the tree job. So we check if an instance place on the X, no, actually on the mouse X and mouse Y position object jobs. No, I'm a dummy, object 301. So we want to check if we click on an object 301, and if that is the case, we can finally create the instance. We're gonna do this in a specific variable though, because we need to address this object we are going to create. So we're gonna set a variable job to instance create, and we're gonna set that to the mouse X minus global dot tile size divided by 2, and Y, or mouse Y minus global dot tile size divided by 2, and we want to create an object jobs. So now we have this newly created instance in this variable and we can address it directly. Also right here, the minus global tile size divided by 2 is of course for correction purposes. We want to create our job menus on the exact tile the tree is on and not slightly to the right and down. But anyways, now we can actually address this instance using the with statement, and I now fully comprehend the with statement. It is incredibly useful, I have to tell you. Now what I didn't understand is that anything I write in here is as if it would be on the job instance itself. So anything I put in here is as if the script was on the job event, and that is crazy useful. Also, I can refer back to the instance which is calling the with statement using the other prefix. So I can, for instance, set a variable on the job event, the instance we created with the self statement, and at the same time I can use another statement in order to take variables from this script. Guys, that is extremely useful. I didn't fully comprehend it up to now. But anyways, in here what we want to do is a move snap, and we're gonna set it to global.tilesize, which will align it to our grid, because of course we do not always click on the correct spot of the tile. We will be clicking sometimes more to the left, more to the right, and this move snap will actually correct it and make sure the job gets created on the exact tile the tree is on. But anyways, now that we have this sorted out, our jobs can be created. Now we have to make sure that the survivors actually react to it, and for that we're gonna go back to the object job itself in the step event and create a script right there. Okay, now this is gonna be a hell of a script, but we might be able to do some copying and pasting as well. So first of all, I want to set a bunch of variables. So first of all, let's remember where the script is. The script is on the step event of the object jobs, which means this will get immediately into place after we have created the job. The job has already some health points, and we're trying to make sure that this job checks for the nearest survivor which is still available to send the coordinates of the job to the survivor and make sure he or she is moving towards it. Once the survivor is on the job event, the health points will be going down. And once the health points reach 0, the tree will be destroyed along with the job object and a log will spawn. Everything that I just said will happen in this script, so this is gonna be a doozy, bear with me. Anyways, let's set a bunch of variables first. The first variable I want to set is self-assigned equals false. Not assigned means that it will be on the image index 0, which is red. And we want to make sure that we assign it to a survivor as soon as possible. Also, I want the self move to pause x to be equal to x. So I will just store the current x coordinate of the object job. I will also do that with the pause y, of course. Next up, we want to initiate a bunch of checks. Now, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm only going for about 9 checks or so. We want to check for the nearest villager, and sometimes the nearest villager is not available, so we need to check in a different position if there is a villager or a survivor which is available. So we are also going to set a bunch of variables, which I'm going to call check 1 to check 9, and we're just going to set that to image index. In case the image index is 0, that means no survivor has been found yet, so we can move on to the next check. If the image index is 1, it means it will have found a survivor and the checks can actually stop. So let's just copy that in about 9 times and 9. Oh my gosh, I actually did count correctly there. Okay, let's give this a proper title too. This is the set variables section of the script. Now we're gonna move on to the scanning for available survivors. For this one here, I'm gonna actually use a switch statement, because once we have found a survivor, we don't want to move on anymore. The switch is of course going to check the image index. So if the image index is 1 and not 0, we want to break immediately, because that means it actually has found a survivor and it doesn't need any allocation. But if it is still on image index 0, we can move on to the first check. So case check 1, we want to create a variable called nearest survivor, and we're going to set that equal to instance nearest XY object survivor. And immediately afterwards we're gonna go into that instance using the with statement, so nearest survivor, and in here we are gonna check if the self available is true. So now we are checking on the survivor itself if the self available variable equals true. By default it is true, so all those survivors will be available. So if that is the case, we want to set the self available to false, so he or she will not be able to take on any more jobs. At the same time, we want to set the other assigned to equal true, which means the job is now assigned to a survivor and doesn't need to check for any other survivors. We are also going to set the other image index to be equal to 1, which means it is assigned, it will switch to blue. And remember, other is addressing the jobs object, while self is addressing the villager object, which is so crazy cool. That is really great that I figured that out. So useful. Anyways, if the check 1 was actually successful, we then want to check if self assigned equals true. So if that is the case, we are going to break this switch statement. So now that I'm thinking about it, I think we can only have one check, as this is on the step event and everything will be repeated. So let me actually try that. We're only gonna have one check variable, but we are gonna perform several checks in the script anyways, using the same variable. And make sure that this if statement is actually outside the with statement, but still inside the check. And we have to remove this one, so there we go. So we have performed the first check on the same exact spot where the object jobs is actually located, which means it will look for the nearest survivor. But if that guy is not available, we need to perform a different check in another location, because if we checked in the same location, it will address the same not available survivor again. So let's go ahead and create another case with a check. And I'm just gonna title this. This is gonna be check 1, and down below we're gonna have check 2. Now before we move on to check 2, there is one more thing we want to initiate in this with statement, and that is to actually move the villagers. Right now we're just gonna do it rudimentary. Of course, eventually we cannot do that because there needs to be some pathfinding, but right now I'm just gonna move the survivors in a straight way towards the object they need to go to. So let's make a move towards point, and we are gonna say the other move to pause X, which is the X position of course of our job, as well as other dot move to pause Y. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe we could even just, set that to other dot X. I personally haven't tested that, but I would assume this also works. Anyways, we also want to set the speed, which is going to be the survivor working speed, so they will be slightly faster going towards the objects and not just slender around. But anyways, that's all we have to do for one check. Now it's all about copying and pasting various checks and adjusting the X and Y coordinates to be in a different location, so it will basically jump around with each check, trying to find the nearest villager in a different location, which is still available. And as soon as he or she is available, we will set the various variables, and we will check if the self-assigned equals true, and then take a break, so the script doesn't move anymore. Also, once the object is assigned, nothing of that will be running anymore, because we are on the image index 1, and we will break immediately, so anything that goes after this will be ignored. Anyways, let me copy this over for about 9 checks, and then we can move on with different parts of the script. Alright, as you can see, I made all of the 9 checks using the same variable, using the same scripts, and what I did is just change the coordinates where it will check for the nearest survivor. For now we're just checking the coordinates that are 10 tiles away and also the ones that are 5 tiles away. Of course, if we want to be thorough and on big maps, we would have to check for more tiles. But that shouldn't be a problem, it's really easy to just copy this over and change the coordinates. What we now want to do is actually execute the job. And for that purpose we are gonna use the nearest survivor variable which has been generated in the script. So nearest survivor x position, if that is actually smaller or equal to x plus 10. And this is just a random value which I have taken. We could also choose 5 to be more accurate, but what that will do is basically make the survivor stop at approximately 10 pixels away from the x coordinates. So it can be smaller than x plus 10, it can also be bigger than x minus 10. So we have a 20 pixel range where the survivor is in the correct spot. We have to do the same thing, of course, for the y coordinate. So nearest survivor is smaller or equal to x plus 10 and nearest survivor dot y is bigger than x minus 10. No, actually y minus 10, oh my gosh. Also y and nearest. Okay, I think I've corrected all of the mistakes, yeah. Okay, let's open up the brackets here. So now we basically checked if the survivor is nearby, which we have assigned to do the job. So we want to stop the survivor. We're gonna address the survivor again with the with statement, and we are gonna set the h speed to be equal to 0 and the v speed to be equal to 0. This will basically just stop the move towards point action. Next up, we want to decrease health points. So as long as the villager is in set range, we want to decrease the health points. So we're gonna say self.health points minus equal 1. And we're also gonna check if self health points is smaller or equal to 0. Then we want with the nearest survivor the self available to be true. So you see how useful that with statement is. We can just, in any part of our code, address variables on the survivor. This will make him or her again available to take other jobs. Now, of course, also with this if statement, we want to remove a job and the tree altogether. So we're gonna create another variable called remove tree. I'm gonna set that equal to instance nearest xy object tree. Now of course this will always be the correct instance because the job object is on the tree itself and this will therefore be the closest. And now we can go into that tree, the with statement again of course, and we can destroy it. There we go, instance destroy. Also, we want to remove the job object. Unfortunately, we will have to do this outside the with statement. So maybe what we could do is take this outside the with statement and just create a new health points statement. So we're gonna say if self health points is smaller or equal to 0, then we want this remove job and tree to pop in. And we can set the title right here. Yeah, I think that's better. So now we can also remove the job and we can simply do an instance destroy because this code now is on the job event and not in the tree event, or even worse, in the survivor event. I'm always saying event, but I'm meaning object. Whew, guys, believe it or not, but we are actually done with this code. If everything is working out, we should be able to click on trees, assign jobs, and the villagers will go for it. Okay guys, one tiny little correction I had to reverse is all of these variables, the check 1, 2, 3 to 9. The reason we cannot use the same variable all over the place is because we cannot have two same cases. Now even though we are still checking for the number 0, we cannot check in two different cases for the number 0, but what we can do is trick out the system by checking for different variables, but all the variables will be set to the same thing, so in the end it doesn't make any difference, but we still have to actually make those variables. So let's dive into the game and check out our creation. Alrighty, so here we are. This is exciting. We can now actually click the trees and the nearest villager will be assigned. We have the various cases which are checking in case the nearest villager is already occupied, and also the image index will be 0 in case there is no villager available. Now what we haven't programmed in is of course the loot or the drops. That is something we're gonna do in the next episode or so. So right now with the current code produced in this episode, we would only just simply destroy the tree and the job object, and nothing else would be going on. So yeah, that was quite a hell of an episode, but I like the episodes to be rounded up, and I would have found that rather disappointing to split it up into several parts, as it is kind of one thing to do. But anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a lot. As usual, keep on giving me your feedback as well as your likes. These videos take a long time to produce, so all the feedback is appreciated. But other than that, have a great time, and hopefully I'm going to catch you the next time. Bye bye.